Hello there, and welcome to another exciting episode of Two Gamers with Love. My name is Justin, and this week we are talking about loot. No, not the traditional instrument of beloved bards. I'm talking about the treasure, the items, the gear, the ultimate weapons, and the rarest of rare drops. Why do we love it? What makes those shinies so shiny? And is loot enough to make you fall in love with a video game, or do you need something more? I'll be joined this week by some very special guests, so grab your bottomless bags of holding, rev up the RNG machine, and pop those engrams. It's time to talk about loot. Let's get into it. All right, so games and loot, right? This is a big deal. I mean, this is a reason why a lot of people really enjoy playing video games, and it's one of the sort of most enticing aspects, I think, of why people really love games. I think there's something about the psychology of the carrot and the stick, right? We want to chase something exceptional. Traditionally for me, I've always loved the narrative side of games. I've always loved the way that games are able to tell stories in such unique and interactive ways. I just don't feel like there's any other medium that can do it the same way that video games do it. I think video games are extremely unique in that way. I think they are the most interactive and innovative form of storytelling that exists. But not only do they do that, they also kind of, in a strange way, give you stuff. It's something that you don't quite get with movies and books, unless you are willing to sort of use your imagination in some significant ways. But games kind of, they give you things. They give you trophies, maybe, if you want to call it that, or, treasures, loot, gear, weapons, collectibles, cosmetics. There's so many different kind of ways that this idea has been framed by video games, but most games, kind of have this system in place where you play the game, you enjoy the act of playing the game, right? You enjoy maybe the jumping, the shooting, the puzzle solving, whatever the game kind of offers you to physically do with your hands and your controllers and your keyboards. And then you got the story. So the game offers you that sort of narrative experience as well, but then it also offers you these items, these things that you can acquire. And it's a really interesting dynamic because these things are not real. They are not tangible things in the traditional sense. They are not things that you can put on a shelf in your home or hold in your hand. They are things that exist purely in this digital space. They exist in this, video game world. And you have to kind of be willing to open your mind to the idea that yes, those things are not tangible in a traditional sense, but you put in time and work and expertise and all kinds of other things to obtain these digital, not real things, if you want to use that sort of terminology. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And as I'll be talking to one of my friends a little bit later in the episode about, there's a game that I've played for years that I love, and it's very much tied up in this system of going after loot. Final Fantasy XI is an MMORPG, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and a big part of the draw of that game is spending a lot of time kind of trying to get the gear that you want so that you can do other things in the game. Getting that extremely powerful weapon, or obtaining that really rare piece of armor, or spending time farming, as they call it, farming some kind of item in order to buy something that you need. It's an interesting process, and it keeps you sustained in a lot of ways. And that game in particular has sort of done this for about 20 years now. And there's still tons of stuff in that particular game that I don't have. There is still gear and loot and treasure that I am chasing in Final Fantasy XI. And that's just one game. And with the absolute deluge of video games in sort of our contemporary space that we are in right now, there's just so many video games, and so many of them kind of demand your attention in this way to get all the best gear and loot and stuff that they have to offer. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. I think to a game like Anthem as an example of this, kind of a really interesting game, but it had some problems with loot and with gear and with weapons and armor and how you do all that. I think of another contemporary example, Outriders, a really interesting game, very much like the game Destiny, which is another game that I play all the time. And that game also had kind of a too much loot problem. So there's some really interesting, I think, things to talk about when it comes to loot. And to do that, I would love to welcome a buddy of mine who I play games with regularly. My friend TheMogHouse is going to be joining us for a quick discussion on loot. And then I'll be back a little bit later to talk about some of my favorite loot in video games. So this week on Two Gamers with Love, I have a very special guest, the privilege of inviting my good buddy, TheMogHouse, to the show to talk about loot. So it's going to be really a fun conversation with my gaming buddy, Mog. So to kick things off, Mog, why don't you just let the folks know where you're from? Where are you operating out of?
You know where I'm from. The UK, for good's sake. England.
Yes. So Mog joins us all the way from across the pond. Thank you so much for hanging out. And I thought it would be a good place for us to start would be a game that we both know and love that is so centered around loot, and that is Final Fantasy XI, which we've both been playing since it came out, or approximately around there, for like 20 years, right? That game came out in like 2001. And so that's one of those MMORPGs. So why don't you remind the folks what does that stand for again? Can you tell us what that means?
Jeez, put me on the spot, dude. A massively multiplayer online role-playing game.
Nice.
Did I get that right?
I think that's right. I have no clue what it stands for.
No one told me this was a test.
Oh, it's all a test. This whole thing is actually one giant test. But no, let's start with one of the most infamous pieces of gear loot in Final Fantasy XI. Something that took folks years and months and all kinds of time to obtain because of the random loot dropping thing that Final Fantasy, the RNG of Final Fantasy XI, the defending ring. So what is this? What is this ring, and I don't know, how do you get it? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the defending ring is a level 70 piece with damage taken -10, which for years and years and years was like the best in slot in the ring category, and it had a drop rate of probably 1%, maybe less than that, from a monster that originally had, I want to say, a 24-hour spawn. It might have been 72 hours. But yeah, extremely rare piece.
Wow, so this was a piece of gear that you had to actually like wait a certain amount of time before the monster would come back again, and there were other people trying to get it, and it wasn't just something that you could kind of work on. You had to actually like work around time.
Yes, like the camping of the three dragons was insane.
Oh wow, so see, I barely remember this. So there was like multiple enemies involved in like obtaining what you needed to fight the main guy, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, I say dragons. I always refer to him as dragons. So you've got King Behemoth, the one in, not Crawler's Nest, the tree, the Beata tree, whose name escapes me, Fafnir.
Yeah, I think we did the Unity version of him a couple of times at some point.
Yes. And then there's Tiamat, which was in Adoa Chasm, I think.
Oh, so wait, so there were like mobs in other zones you had to kill to get items to get to the main guy? I really don't remember how it worked.
No. You just killed the Behemoth to get the pop for the King Behemoth. But I think, I can't remember if it was like, I don't think it was ever like a pop spawn for King Behemoth. I don't think it was. I think it was like a chance that he could spawn instead of just the regular Behemoth. But it's been at least 15 years since that system changed. So, I don't know. Yeah, see, that's crazy, because
I kind of came to it a little bit later. Before, like, I didn't even attempt to get that ring until much, much later in my Final Fantasy XI career. And I went in there with, it was a different system by that point, but that ring, even to this day, is like a really excellent item. And that's what's so interesting about 11 and the way it approaches its loot system is like, there are pieces of gear that still like 15, 20 years later, they are the best pieces of gear in the game. and you still want those pieces of gear. And some people are still trying to get them. They're still on that loot grind, trying to craft an item, to find that RNG magic that gives you the item drop finally. I mean, there are a couple of items in the game that still haven't dropped for us after 20 years. So like, it's crazy that like that system still works under this kind of premise of there is a real best in slot piece of gear. And like this defending ring is like the one you want to have. Like it's still a really, really excellent piece of gear. And there really aren't a lot of other options that can kind of rise up to that level, you know? So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Final Fantasy has always been very good at having a pinnacle best in slot for every situation. It just happens to have so many situations.
Yeah. And like, that's what I love about 11 is like, you know, it has all this cool gear, but then it's not about you kind of chasing the gear necessarily. It's about the encounters and the situations that the developers put in where you can use that gear. And I think that's the key. That's the key thing, right? It's not about the quantity of the loot. It's about how you're going to use that loot to get to the new stuff, right? Like when you get loot, like that should be the chase, right? You should go after the loot that you want because it's going to open up doors later. And I think that's kind of an interesting piece. Kind of, you know, it's funny. Like that defending ring is it's like a unicorn, right? Like it's one of those pieces of gear that like it's hard to get. And I don't know. I have like I have one of those for me personally, from a game that I love dearly from when I was younger and I still play sometimes. Have you ever played Earthbound? It's like one of my all-time favorites.
No, I'm ashamed to say no. I own Earthbound, but I've never played Earthbound.
Oh, that's totally fine. No need to be ashamed. That's a classic, and you know, everybody out there should check that one out. But in that game, there was a character named Pooh, and he was kind of like a samurai, but he used a yo-yo. And there was always this one, there's a sword. There's one sword in Earthbound that Pooh can equip. And it's like a super low drop rate from this one part of the game where you just have to fight enemies in this one part until you get it. It's called the Sword of Kings. And I remember learning about that back in the 90s when Earthbound came out and not knowing how to get it really and kind of always wanting to get it and to find a way. My brother and I, we played that game a lot together. And we always wanted to kind of get the Sword of Kings. And so that was kind of like a mystical thing that a piece of loot that we always wanted. Is there anything like that kind of for you, Mog, these days, like in 11? Like what is like the piece of gear that you just have never gotten in Final Fantasy 11 that you've always wanted?
Something that I haven't got yet? I guess like the Mythic Bard would be good, but that's kind of like ease of use. It's more of a convenience item than like desperately needed.
So that one's like one that you actually work towards to craft and kind of make, and you can actually like actively work on it. But is there anything, I think I know what it might be. Is there anything out there that's like not so much something that you make, but something that you just have to kind of get lucky to actually get, like an RNG kind of thing? I don't know, anything like that?
See, I feel like, I'm being led, and maybe my brain is subconsciously like protecting me from these horrible memories. What is it that I haven't got?
That is 100% what it is. No, I'll give you a hint. It's from a level capped BCNM fight.
Oh Jesus. Okay, so that's the Kraken Club that will never drop in over probably 1,000 times for me.
Yeah, so I feel like the Kraken Club is like this mythical thing. It's one of the most like iconic, unattainable weapons in the game. It'll never drop. The RNG on it is absolutely bonkers.
Yes.
And you know, it's like, it's one of those things where like we've been playing the game, right, for what, 20 years? And you've probably done more attempts to have it drop in that battle than I have. But it's just like never going to happen, right? Like it's crazy.
Yeah. I think that's probably my ultimate one.
Yeah. Like,
but I'm also terrified though, if I ever got that might be the end of the bucket list. Do you know what I mean? Like that might be the thing that's just like, that's it. I've done it all. What else is there to do?
Yeah, like once you get the carrot, right? It's all about carrots and sticks. That's why this episode is called Carrot and Stick. Is like once you obtain the carrot, what do you do from there? Where do you go once you've gotten the thing? So maybe we need that carrot to keep us playing. We need the loot, right? There needs to be something out there that will keep us sustained and keep us playing the game and keep us coming back. And you know, I think a lot of modern games struggle with that because the loot isn't as valuable. There's so much quantity that you lose that sense of like, oh wow, that like that loot that you're after is like really, really worth going for because it's so rare and it's so, you know, it's like you're never going to find it again. And that's also, it brings up like an interesting distinction, right? Because some of the stuff in 11 you can actually like work towards obtaining and crafting, kind of making, right?
Yeah.
But other stuff you have to just rely on RNG. So like, which of those do you prefer? Do you like the randomness, or do you like to kind of be able to work on something?
I do like target loot. I like to be able to like put my time into something and like have an aim and not have it be completely RNG, which is why I quite like Destiny now, because you've got like the crafting system, so you can kind of work towards something. But like this game is difficult because you're just being flooded with loot constantly, and you're not even sure if it's good or bad half the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And right now, as we're recording this, we're playing a Final Fantasy game called Stranger of Paradise: Final Fantasy Origin, and this game is like Mog just said, it's like loot flood, right? You just are you have like.
We should drop down here. Do you know what this is from Final Fantasy 12?
No, what is it? No.
This is the demon wall, if I remember rightly. This wall will move towards us.
Let's go. Let's check this out. I actually don't remember this fight in Final Fantasy 12 at all, but yes, let's drop down.
Punch the wall.
Get it. Get the wall. Yep. But it's interesting. You mentioned Destiny a moment ago, and you know that's another really cool looter that we should talk about, because like I think Destiny does some really interesting things with the loot system, right? It doesn't go too far into the just loot flood of just like you're constantly getting gear all the time, but the gear that you are getting feels interesting and unique and fun. And I think that's one of the main reasons I play that game, is because there's gear that really impacts the way that you play the game and allows you to do things that you wouldn't be able to do without that gear. And I think that's a really important kind of distinction to make, right? The gear has to enable you, the loot has to enable you to do stuff that you couldn't have done otherwise, right?
To be fair with Destiny, do a very good job because you've got 3 weapon slots. Like Final Fantasy 11, you've got a weapon slot, and you usually have like the one best in slot. Like let's say White Mage, for example, you got the Yag Rush. Whereas Destiny, you can have like let's say Witherhoard in one slot, but then you've got a bunch of legendary weapons that you can put in every other slot. There's a lot more variety, I think, in Destiny in that term.
Yeah, and that's so interesting because like, right, in Destiny, you essentially have 3 characters, and they're kind of different, but I usually only play one of those 3. And in Final Fantasy 11, you've got like all these different jobs that you can gear up, right? Well, there's like 21 different jobs in Final Fantasy 11.
22.
Okay, so 22 different jobs. And you kind of like, each of those jobs has their own thing, right?
Yeah.
And like, you're grinding for gear to equip all 21 of those jobs. And I think that loot system, that loot cycle is really fun because it's what kind of keeps you going, right? You have these different experiences with these different jobs, and it's the some of the funnest times we've had in Final Fantasy 11 is gearing up new jobs, like getting those jobs up to a place where we can then use them to do more interesting content. And that's where the loot system gets really, really fun, at least for me in Final Fantasy 11.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different in Destiny, but yeah.
It's overwhelming, but 11, another thing that 11 does really well, and had done for years, is gear progression.
Okay, so right. So you mean like leveling up your gear as in addition to leveling up your character, right? Your gear can level up too, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. You start at the bottom of the barrel, and you can get, I don't know, I'm thinking about levels in 11, but it's kind of changed. But you've got level 99, and you've got level 107, 109, then 119. And like all through those stages, there is like a good thing to aim for that will get you to the next stage to get the next thing, and then the next thing, and so on and so forth. Destiny is not like that at all. Destiny is just you can go straight for the best in slot.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting, like that's a really great way to think about loot in general, and like what we actually want out of these looter games. Like, do we want a loot pool that you know we can recognize what the best gear is and we go for it, or do we want a more expansive loot pool where all the gear is kind of on equal ground and the developers are kind of, you know, tweaking it and making things better, making things not as good? Like in Destiny, they're kind of always trying to create that balance. Or do you want a game where like, this is the gear you're going for, yes, this is the best in slot? Yeah. So like, I think that's a really interesting kind of distinction and an interesting point to make in this discussion. So yeah, nice. So cool. Destiny, Final Fantasy 11, a lot of games that have a lot of cool gear, a lot of cool loot, a lot of cool carrots on a lot of cool sticks. And as we get the cool carrots, right, the sticks sometimes just get bigger and bigger. And maybe that's actually what we want. We just want the the carrot and the stick to keep getting more and more enticing. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. Anything else you want to say about loot or anything about like that before we wrap it up here? Any other closing comments, if you will?
I think so. I think we've covered the basics.
All right, cool. Well, Mog, thanks so much for hanging out on the podcast. It's really great having you here. Talking about loot and some of our favorite journeys through gear in all these different games that we play. It's been really fun, and I really appreciate you hanging out and taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so that was super fun getting to talk to my buddy TheMogHouse about loot. We talk all the time while we're playing. That was the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully some more conversations between us in the future. But I wanted to now take a moment to just go back to what I mentioned at the beginning, and I actually mentioned it a couple of times there in my conversation with Mog, was this wacky item, the Sword of Kings, from one of my all-time favorite, if not my favorite video game of all time, Earthbound. And this information I'm about to relay comes from the fan wiki for Earthbound. But the Sword of Kings is a weapon appearing in Earthbound that can be equipped by Pooh. It's the only sword that he can equip. It is an extremely rare item, only obtainable as a drop, which means you can only get it from fighting monsters, and it's random. So there's no way to target it like Mog was talking about. You have to just get lucky. It is an extremely rare item. It has a 1 in 128 chance of being dropped by a Starman Super in the Stonehenge base. So one very specific area of the game and one very specific monster type. And then on top of all of those restrictions, it's a 1 in 28 chance. So a 0.78125% chance that you will get the King of Swords from one of those Starmen. So, that's just one small example of the kind of thing that video games sometimes do, is they'll put an item in the game that is crazy, but very hard to get. And, I like that. I like that about video games. I think having those little carrots are fun, and I don't want to just have every piece of gear that exists in the game immediately. There's something satisfying and fulfilling to me about putting in time and getting good at a game, and then being rewarded for that time and experience and expertise with some really cool piece of gear, but that's not enough. It can't stop there. As Mog and I were just talking about, you have to be able to then use that piece of gear to do cool stuff in the game. I think a lot of games suffer from this problem. They put in tons of loot in the loot pool, and you grind, and you get the cool stuff. And then what do? Like, there needs to be some bigger carrot. There needs to be something in the game that is insurmountable until you acquire a certain piece of loot or a certain piece of gear. I like that dynamic in video games. Diablo 3 is another great example of this, and I'm hoping to talk to someone else about that here soon. But Diablo 3 is the kind of game where you have to put the time into crafting the gear, obtaining the gear, leveling the gear, not really leveling it, but kind of tweaking it in order to progress through harder parts of the game. And you just can't get through those parts of the game unless you get the loot. And I really like that. So let's bring in another one of my gaming friends. I had the privilege and honor of being joined this week by my buddy Nate. We've spent a lot of time talking, hanging out, drinking beer, talking about video games. And one of the games that we play together often is Diablo 3. It's a game that we both really like, and Diablo 3 is very much about loot. So let's hop in and have a little chat with Nate. Cool. Well, I have another special guest on the podcast this week. My good friend, best buddy, gamer friend, real life friend, all the kinds of friends you can be, I hope. Nate. Thanks. All the friends. So many friends. Thanks so much for taking some time to hop onto the podcast, buddy. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, really excited to talk some games. I know often our conversations either start at games or end up at games. So really cool, really excited for your podcast, and just love the theme of today too.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yes, we not only do we play games, but we like to talk about them and drink beer and talk about them, and pretty much everything involves the drinking of the beer. But
Yeah.
yeah. And so this week's episode 4, is it's called Carrot and Stick because it's all about loot. And so I spent some time talking to my other friend from across the pond about, like we've played Final Fantasy 11 for a long time, and we talked about some of the crazy loot in that game. But Nate and I have spent a lot of time playing Diablo 3 mostly, and I thought it'd be cool to talk about the loot experience in that game. So I guess we can start with kind of the question generally of like, I think this comes up a lot. I think when I'm talking about loot, this idea of like quantity over quality, and one of the things that Final Fantasy 11, and I think to some extent, although Diablo also seems to have the quantity, but in Final Fantasy 11, there's like this one piece of gear, like this one ring, right? Like for example, the defending ring. It's a super rare, really rare drop rate ring that, good luck getting it. Some people are like, oh, and 300 attempts on this very difficult to spawn NM, but it's like the best ring in the game. Once you get it, that ring is going to be best in slot for everything. So I know, like, what do you think? Is it quantity? Like we want tons of loot, or do we want like quality, like the one thing that's the best?
Man, and that's such an interesting question. And like my initial reaction to that is quantity. Like just for me, like I love, and this is speaking really into Diablo 3, just when I hear that noise, like of when a legendary or when a set item drops, you just hear this and this like beam of light comes up. Like that just tickles parts of my brain. That's just like, give me more. It like releases the serotonin, and I'm like, yes, more of that feeling. And in some ways, this might sound terrible, but it's kind of loot boxy. Like back in the loot box days, when you'd open that loot box and like gold and glitter and all that would fly out. I love that experience in a gaming experience, so long as it's done in a way that is not like predatory in any shape. Like the loot boxes to me, it's like, okay, buy this and you might get something. Like at least with Diablo 3, you're just kind of showered with stuff, right? And you and I have talked about Final Fantasy 11, and I never really played it. I'm aware of it, and we've had some long talks about it. And I get that like 0.0000%, 1% like drop rate, and how awesome it is when you get it. But for me as a gamer, having that singular item and just that low drop rate is so hard. Like it doesn't motivate me to play. Whereas Diablo, I feel like it definitely hits the quantity, right? Because you're just littered with loot.
It's so much.
Eventually, that loot, it starts to turn into quality, because similar to what you were talking about with the Defender ring, with Diablo, it's like, and this is with all of the series, like it's that next level. It's getting that, extra +1 dexterity from what you had, or a plus 2 to this skill, or maybe it's even like, in that game they have the ancients and the primals, and so primal drops are super low. And getting one of those is just like this crazy feeling. It's game defining feeling, because it can totally change up your build. But even as you're reaching towards that, Diablo still drip feeds you that like adrenaline and that kick of, you're going to see that beam of light, you're going to get a loot piece. And even if it's not what you're going for, I think the cool thing about the quantity part is it might drop this thing where you go, I wonder what that would look like if I played with it. So it might be something that, instead of working with like a Demon Hunter, for instance, one of their big builds focuses on multi-shot. Maybe instead of multi-shot, you have something that totally changes how you use the strafe skill. And so now you're playing a little bit more defensive, but you're shooting in all directions. And, you're constantly looking and assessing, is this going to be better? Am I willing to invest in this new play style with Diablo? And to me, that's just a really fun game loop for me.
Yes. I could not agree more. And I think the core thing there, there needs to be a reason, right? To put in the time and the effort and the energy to go get the loot, right? Like, so in Final Fantasy 11, it does that so well. Like, I can't even 20 years I've been playing that game and there's still stuff I don't have yet and I'm still trying to get. And I want that stuff because it's going to open up doors for me to do things that I couldn't do without it. Diablo is the same way. Like you're not going to make it to Greater Rift 110 unless you get that perfect roll or that, perfect neck piece or whatever. Like, so it's not just about like, I love the whole, like every time you defeat like a Rift boss in Diablo 3, that like all the stuff's popping out. Right. And like, it's like, oh, it's so fun. But what's underlying that for me is the hope that I'm going to get the thing that's going to let me progress. And I feel like a lot of contemporary loot games miss that. Like I'm thinking about Outriders, I'm thinking about Anthem, I'm thinking about games that I think they strive too hard to make all the gear like equal in a way. Yeah. And so it just makes everything feel like watered down. Like it doesn't matter. Like I can get to like Outriders is a perfect example. I think it's a cool game. I beat that whole game. I enjoyed playing it, but I can get to the end of that game with the same gear I had, at the beginning of the game. And it just doesn't feel like I need to get any of it. It's cool and fun and interesting, but I don't need it to play.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that with Outriders. Outriders was a game like I was really into, really excited for. It does some of that loot thing where you see all the shinies on the ground and they got that different color that kind of pops up. They've got that little sound indicator, so it was tickling all the parts. But I agree. It didn't like that loop, that feedback of interesting gameplay never really fully captured me. And I'm not sure if it's, for me, I think it's their version of exotics or legendaries. I forget what they're called in that. But like they never felt game changing. They never like, there were some ways you could really like one or two weapons or something like that would really like impact a build and you would build up your character around that specific item. But I agree with you. I think there are ways to kind of work around it. And then their end game system, I think, was just a little shallow and broken.
Yeah. Yeah, it just didn't have the stick was there, but there was no carrot. And I feel like a lot of contemporary looter games miss that mark. I'm thinking of Avengers. I'm thinking of like all these games that they just go for quantity. Like you just want to see the loot popping out and like stuff everywhere, and you're just getting items. Like we're Mog and I are playing Stranger of Paradise, which we really like a lot. That game's super fun, and we're really digging it, especially because there's a Final Fantasy 11 level in that, which looks amazing in Unreal 4. But like that game is horrible for this. Like every enemy that you kill, you're getting 5, 6, 7 pieces of gear that really don't mean anything, that are just kind of like, it's just nonstop. It's like a deluge. And like, I don't know if there's like stuff at the end of that game that's going to be like different or not. We're not quite to the end yet, but like, I don't know. Like it just doesn't make the gear feel special enough. I don't need quantity, but unless you do it well, like the way the Diablo, although I do spend half of my time just going to the armor guy and just dismantling everything.
Yes. Well, but I think what you're talking about is item bloat, right? And that's, I played Final Fantasy 14, which has cool gear in it. And honestly, like it looks awesome. I think their gear is really much more cosmetic focused, which I also think, maybe not for this podcast, but maybe another one, if you look at it, is the cosmetic drive for a lot of players. Like I'm thinking Call of Duty and all that. That's a different kind of maybe intrinsic value, is to show like, look how good I am by the bling I got in my gun. I mean, it's the same with Final Fantasy 14, and check out my cool transforming weapon with all the glowy bits here and there, and shows you that I did this ultimate or savage raid. So that there's like that piece to it. But for Diablo, and I think also Destiny, like it's less about, there's a little bit of, oh dude, you got lucky and got this sweet item, or it's like, hey, you've put in the time. Not even necessarily that you're good, because especially Destiny 1, less so with Destiny 2, because I think there's a lot of items and weapons and gear that's locked behind skill level content, right?
Yeah.
But Diablo doesn't have a lot of skill level. It's like you talked about, progression.
Yeah.
So me, especially as what I'd call kind of a weekend warrior player, like I play hard when I have the time, but like as an adult gamer, it's hard to like pump in a lot of hours that some of these streamers and stuff can do.
Oh yeah.
And so not feeling like I'm left out because I can't do this ultimate content that everyone else can just like do, but like given time, I'm Diablo was released what? Diablo 3 2012, I think.
Yeah, it was about 10
I got
years
it
ago.
at launch. Yeah. I got it at lunch, and I'm still playing it. And it, even though I don't play it like consistently, every year I go back to it in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Yeah. I same thing. Got it on PC at launch, PS4 version, 3 version, PS4 version, Switch version. Bought the PC version again on a different Battle.net account. So yeah, I've been playing that game. Yeah, and I'm still interested in it because there's just so much to do for each class, and that was another interesting piece. Like, you know, gearing up different job classes, if you will. Like Destiny doesn't, like Destiny kind of does that. Outriders kind of did it, but like having like 21 different unique jobs in Final Fantasy 11, all with their own unique sets of gear, weapons, everything else, and same sort of thing in Diablo. Like there's a lot of depth there with that system.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, what you were saying about like, maybe it might be for another episode or something, but this idea that like, the social aspect of it, I think that's huge. Like Final Fantasy 11, 100% had that aspect because you could check other players. You could click on them and like look at their gear. So you would click on someone and be like, "Oh my goodness, that guy has that thing. That's insane. I want to go get that." You know?
Yeah.
So I think that part of it is important too. And I think Fortnite taps into that in some ways too. Like with their cosmetic system. But yeah, so all that's interesting. Yeah.
I think that's a trend in modern gaming, right? It's let's give the players that carrot that, is the title of your podcast. It's all about incentivizing them to continue to play. And that could be through cosmetic. It could be through gear progression, which itself becomes its own end game to a certain extent. Diablo 3 learned the hard way that you can't just run the same content. Like say, okay, we'll replay the whole campaign. Just hope you get better gear this time.
Yeah.
They did a really good job specifically with Diablo 3 that I think a lot of games have tried to recapture but haven't quite got. With that, they built an engine, right? So there's this system of you get gear, it's not quite you want, you break it down like you said when you go to the armor, you break it all down. But then that allows you to either craft something with Kanai's cube, or you're still going for it and hoping with a little RNG you get something that's a little bit better. And it's pretty good at drip feeding a little bit better, whatever algorithm they created for that game.
Yeah.
Like it's constantly giving you something that you always feel like you're progressing. When you talked about going through greater rifts, you don't usually jump from like, okay, I'm at rift 25 to like 90 because you got this one item. It's because you're kind of gearing and then it's like, okay, I hit the ceiling. What do I need? I think I can update my bracers. I think I can update my weapon, or maybe I can slot a gem here or there. And everything you're doing, all that bloat that you had before that maybe you kept because you think you might use it, now you're going, nah, I'm going to break that down because I'm going to take a gamble and see if I can get just a little bit better if I gamble on this item because I need another bracer slot.
Yeah.
That's how they really capture me in that. Even though I'm really doing essentially the same thing, I'm still motivated to play that game.
100%. Couldn't agree more. It's exactly right. Like it gets faster, it gets quicker, it gets more powerful. The numbers start to get insane. You're leveling up your gems, you're leveling up. It's that progression. A lot of games it's just like, okay, I got the weapon and it's over. Now what do I do with the weapon? Like I go play stuff, the same thing I've been doing with this new weapon. Like you got to have the carrot. Like you got to have the next thing that you can then go do with the awesome new gear that you got that you couldn't do before. That's, I think, the key thing. Yeah. Like getting to do stuff that opening those doors that you can't do until you get the loot that you need is the key thing. So that's I totally agree. Yeah. So you want to go through the list of like rare items?
Oh no, everyone's gonna know what a scrub I am now.
No, I think I had like 0 out of 20 on this, so you're fine. All right, I bet you have the number 20. I bet you have it. I bet you've done this. Number 20 is the like radiant armor from Breath of the Wild, like the skeleton armor.
Yes.
Okay, so I do not have that. You got that.
I think I got every single armor in Breath of the Wild. I put a lot of time in that. Nice. I even got that stupid Korok poop.
Man, that's intense. I don't know how to. I gave up on the Korok seeds a long time ago. Number 19 is the invisibility cap from Mario Odyssey. I guess you can get the cap to become invisible if you beat the last moon level, which I could not beat. The last gauntlet level.
Huh.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about that.
Me either. Yeah. You need 500 moons and to beat the last gauntlet level.
I'm pretty sure I have really close to 500 moons, but I think I'm also stuck on that last level.
Yeah, it's like you don't get any health and you have only one life, and it's really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Number 18, I don't know. Battlefield 4, there's some sort of phantom bow. I don't know. I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't have anything Battlefield.
Yeah.
I like the game, just never really got into it.
Yeah, same. Dragon Age Inquisition, another classic I've never played, but there's another bow of perseverance. Apparently that's super rare that people go for in that, but I don't know that one.
Nope.
Yeah. You ever played Monster Hunter World?
Yes.
All right. Did you ever get the clothes for the little pig thing, Poogie?
Yes, I did get some of the clothes. Yes.
Okay, there you go. That's number 16. So
okay.
Good job. Did you ever get Sturm in Destiny 2?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. That I don't. Drone. Yeah, I'm not sure why that one. That's just a kind of an exotic weapon in Destiny 2, so I don't know.
Yeah, it was a dual one because it worked in tandem with the Strang, which was a legendary, so you could have two pistols.
Yeah, cool. And they just brought back one of those recently in some new expansion. A set of armor from Assassin's Creed is number 14. The Isu armor. I don't know. I haven't played one of those.
You know which Assassin's the first one? Because I 100%ed 1 and 2.
Okay. In Assassin's Creed 2, there was the armor of Altair. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood had the armor of Brutus. In Assassin's Creed Origins, there was the Isu armor.
Okay, I didn't play Origins.
Yeah, I don't think I played that either. A Pokemon item from Sun and Moon called Evium Z. Don't know about that one. Skyrim, Sapphire's Exquisite Sapphire.
Yes. Where you had to do that stupid gem quest?
No, I don't know. I never did it. What you have to know, the thing about me that you have to understand is that I buy 90% of the games and I finish 2% of them. There's a Final Fantasy 13 Triple Triad card. Apparently,
I got so excited when you said 13 because I was like, "Oh, I might have gotten this," and then you said Triple Triad, and I'm like,
"Yeah, it's some kind of little UFO alien card." Number 10 is like near and dear to my heart. It's an item that I've never gotten in my all-time favorite game ever made. It's the Sword of Kings from Earthbound.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I only recently played through Earthbound, so after it was released. Yeah, so I did not invest that much time into it.
That's okay. I mean, so there's a character named Pooh who uses yo-yos, but there is a sword he can get that is a 1 in 128 chance of it dropping in this one area off of this one specific monster. It's so I never got it, but yeah.
See, and that sounds right up your alley. That sounds so Final Fantasy 11.
Yeah, it's that thing again. Yeah, for sure. That's the Scarab gun from Halo 2 is on here. Is number 9.
Yeah, I did do that.
Nice. Man, you're doing good on this. You're like 12 for 20 so far. Strange treasures from Uncharted 4. You have to get some sort of treasures from using your grappling hook. Not sure. Fire Emblem Awakening, not one that I played, but Goddess Staff.
Goddess Staff.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I got that. I did complete Fire Emblem Awakening.
Nice. There's apparently World War II soccer balls in Call of Duty World War II that you can get, but I never played that one. Yep. The secret Minecraft homage area in Borderlands 2. I'm not sure why that's on here. It's not really an item. It's more of an area, a secret area.
I feel like I did. I was really close to finding pretty much all the Easter eggs. I made it a point to find Easter eggs in Borderlands 2.
Nice. You probably came across it then, I'm sure.
I think I did.
Yeah.
Borderlands 3 I never finished though.
Yeah, I never. Yeah, same. Or maybe I might have finished that game. There's a hand cannon apparently in Dead Space 2 you can get. That's like an actual bullet wielding. Hang on. Yeah.
Oh, so I got the foam finger. Is that different?
They have a foam finger, he said?
Yeah, and then you go pew pew and it blows them up.
That's hilarious.
He actually goes pew pew.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. Fallout 4 has a Pit-Boy like Donkey Kong game you can get. I guess.
I played Pip-Boy games on there. I don't think I got specifically the Donkey Kong one.
Yeah, it looks like there's a picture of that Donkey Kong one. In the original Dark Souls is number 2 here. There's some great magic barrier item that makes you like invincible to magic.
I definitely wasn't invincible in that game at any point.
Yeah, I didn't get very far. And then number 1 on here is the Forbidden Grip of the Ages from God of War on PS5, PS4. Which I never finished, which I need to finish before the new one comes out.
Wait, what is it?
It's called the Forbidden Grip of the Ages. And apparently there's like...
Thanos Gauntlet?
Sorry?
Is it the like, I think it was basically they made it look like the Thanos Gauntlet.
Oh, I don't know. I don't see it. That's cool. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I got that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, they had to be like, fans had to like translate runes and like go to this like place that was off the map. I don't know. This looks pretty intense.
If it was off the map, I probably didn't do it.
I have no idea.
I did 100% that game.
Nice. I haven't beaten it yet.
Like real close. But
nice. Man, well, that was it. That was the list. I was shocked that like, I don't know, I would have added the Kraken Club from Final Fantasy XI. That thing is still 100 billion gil if you want to buy one. It never drops. We've been playing that game for 20 years. We've never seen it once, drop ever. So Kraken Club is on that list for me. Is there anything that you would add that's not there?
There's one that I remember working so hard to get, and it's so stupid you can't do it without a guide type weapon. It was Final Fantasy XII's. I think it might have only been in the Zodiac Age, so the remake, the re-release. It's this invisible bow, and I think it's called like it's not Sagittarius, it's like the Satan Grat or something like that.
Oh, cool.
But like you couldn't, if I remember it right, you couldn't pick up certain treasure chests in the game. Because if you picked up the wrong treasure chest, then it wouldn't be available. And then you had to go to, I feel like it was a ship or somewhere, like a flying ship or someplace that was up high, like in a town area. And you had to like step in the very perfect spot and like, and then you had to hit X. There was no indicator of when you'd get it, but you had to do it like just the right time.
Oh, that's crazy.
A rare chest spawn with it. There's a bunch of weird stuff with it. I can't remember exactly how I did. All I remember is it was like invisible and it hit like crazy and you had crazy high evasion. It was like the highest damage by far and you were almost like people couldn't attack you because the evasion was so high.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, there's so much cool stuff like that. Like that list I feel like isn't quite as comprehensive, but that's so cool. I don't get most of those items, but it's cool that they exist. And I'm glad there's some people that are able to get them. Well, cool, man. That's awesome. Thank you for chatting with me. We'll probably wrap it up here, but that was a great discussion, and I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Is there any closing thoughts, final thoughts, anything else you want to share or say before we sign off?
Yeah, just thank you for the opportunity. I love talking loot. I think that's like my favorite genre of games is anything that brings that loot.
Yeah.
Those are always games I come back to, but I also just want to say I love the idea of the podcast and I'm really excited for, other opportunities and
cool.
Yeah, go loot.
Thanks, man. We'll definitely have you back on if you want to come back because I have two gaming friends, and so I need to have you on here a lot.
Happy to do so.
Cool, Nate. Thanks for coming over. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. All right, and that wraps up this week's episode of Two Gamers with Love. This was a big one. This is almost an hour long. Special thanks to the MogHouse. Special thanks to my friend Nate. Special thanks to all the gamers out there who are chasing all the carrots on all the sticks. May you have the best of luck getting all of your drops, and let me know your thoughts on this whole loot discussion. Send me a message to the podcast. Hit me up on Twitter. Check out my Twitch channel, YouTube, leave comments, whatever you want to do, however you want to engage. You could also join our Discord community, which I've established now, and I'm starting to try to grow that a little bit. So you can find the links to all those things in the description and in the details for the podcast here on Anchor. And thank you all so much for listening and for all the support. This has been super fun, and look forward to another exciting episode next week. Until next time, my name is Justin, and this has been Two Gamers with Love.